The Raiders are on to Week 14, and so are we. It's crossover Thursday. Tampa Bay, Las Vegas. Let's break it down on Thursday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for December 5th, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making this show your first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate you, whether you're catching us wherever you find your favorite podcast or you're checking us out on YouTube. Either way, we definitely appreciate that. I do want to shout out everyone who listens to us by way of Spotify. And Spotify, every single year, they have the wrap up, and it lets you know what you've listened to the most throughout the course of the year. And so many people sent a screenshot to me letting me know that the Locked On Raiders podcast was their number one, maybe even number two, some number three, but it didn't matter. It was all good. So many hashtag first listens. I really do appreciate it. You know, I have no idea how much that means that you spent so much time with me throughout the course and the year of 2024. So thanks so much again. The show has grown in such a major way since I took over this podcast, 6 seasons ago now, and it just seems like yesterday. But I mean, when I tell you I appreciate you, I absolutely 100% mean I appreciate you and the support each and every day. YouTube page is going crazy. My man Ari's doing a fantastic job behind the scenes, so we shout him out. We appreciate him. He's on Twitter holding it down at Ari Produces. I'm on Twitter as well, at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, you know the number 707-654-4693. Now, no calls or texts on today's show. Again, it's Crossover Thursday, and if you are new to the show, welcome. On Thursdays, what we do is look at the next game on the schedule for the Silver and Black. So, Tampa Bay, Week 14, James Yarcho. He's the host of Locked On Bucs. He joins the show, and we're going to talk all things offensive, defensive storylines for Tampa Bay and the Raiders and talk about keys to victory. It's something we do all season long here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Most people's favorite show of the week throughout the course of the season. And even when it's a 2-10 record, as the Raiders do have, it's still something to pay attention to and lock in just so you get to know the opponent. And again, this week, it is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So we'll do that segment 1, 2, and 3. We'll get your calls and texts. We'll do that on Friday as we close out the show really strong, talk about keys to victory, what to look for, and news and notes as we always do. But again, it's Crossover Thursday. Excited about it. We'll jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. It doesn't matter if the Raiders are 2-10. It's still another game to be played. Antonio Pierce is taking it that same way. The players are taking it that same way. So next up is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. James Yarcho, and me talking all things Raiders here in segment number 1, offensive and defensive storylines, the biggest storylines. So let's go ahead and break that down here in segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast.
The Bucs look to stay in the hunt for the NFC South because Kirk Cousins is doing Kirk Cousins things. But we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Let's kick things off with the Las Vegas Raiders here. They played the Black Friday game against the Kansas City Chiefs, and it was a close, albeit questionable, loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. But the Raiders kind of seem to be all over the place right now. They're dealing with injuries, looking for an answer in the run game. But Q, what is the biggest story surrounding the Las Vegas Raiders offense?
Well, I think it's really how they continue to grow and build off of what they were able to do. The success that they did have against Kansas City on Black Friday. Aiden O'Connell had come in to the game, right, and really had just come off of IR that week. It was a short week. They had played on Sunday. It was Gardner Minshew. He went out with the injury. He's done for the season. Aiden O'Connell gets activated off of IR. Short week, all walkthroughs. And, oh, by the way, he's learning a new offense under Scott Turner, who is now the interim offensive coordinator. So I was wondering what it was going to look like, in that kind of a setting. And he did a really good job. Threw over 300 plus yards, 2 touchdowns, looked really good, was able to stretch the field. The Raiders haven't stretched the field all season long. So it really looked good. So now it's, okay, how do you build off that? Now, again, as you mentioned, the game was a heartbreaker. They lost one that they felt like they had right there. They had an opportunity to kick a field goal at the end and walk it off and get the dub, and it just didn't happen. They never was able to execute it correctly. So that was a heartbreaker. So I think offensively, it's really how do they build off the success that they had, and then just really as a team, how do they bounce back off of that tough loss against a rival in the Kansas City Chiefs when they thought they had an opportunity to upset them for the second year in a row in Kansas City.
Yeah, and all credit to Aiden O'Connell going in a tough situation like that is not easy, especially with the struggles that the Raiders are already having.
Yep.
But talk to me about the run game. It seemed like there was some excitement about you got this new running back coming in, this rookie, and then all of a sudden there's just nothing there for the Raiders on the ground. What's kind of been the biggest problem in that aspect of the offense?
Well, I mean, the run game all season has been really bad. It really has. And Antonio Pierce wants to run the ball. He's told us time in and time again, got to run the ball, got to run the ball, got to run the ball. Well, they haven't been able to. Zamir White did a good job last year, the last 4 games of the season, filling in for Josh Jacobs. So everyone thought, including myself, he was going to be able to slide in and be that guy this year. Well, he wasn't. He's been banged up. They went and had Alexander Madison. They signed him as a free agent. He was actually pretty decent, but decent is a nice way of saying that he was just okay, right? I mean, he wasn't great, and then he goes out. So now Sincere McCormick is in, and Sincere McCormick is a guy that's been with the team since 2022. He just hasn't gotten any burn. He was on the practice squad. He's been injured. He was a hell of a player coming out of UTSA. I mean, he went for over 1,400 yards the last 2 seasons in college. I mean, he was fantastic, but because of injuries, he hasn't been able to get onto the field. So a couple of weeks ago against Denver, he got 5 carries and got 34 yards. I thought, wow, that looks better than anything that the Raiders have had really this season. So maybe they'll build off of that. So against Kansas City, he gets another 15 carries and gets, 64 yards. And so he's almost at 100 yards with less than 20 carries so far on the season. So now I'm interested, we talk about the offense and how they could build off the success. Can that guy continue to have success, right? I mean, his biggest thing has been availability, but now that he looks like he's available, can he build off what he's been doing? Can he continue to run hard between the tackles? Can he continue to run downhill? Can he continue to pick up the big yardage that he's getting? And more importantly, James, can he stay on the field on 3rd down? How's his pass protection? That was the one area that I look at and say, yeah, he's good at running, but that's the area that he needs to improve on as a pass pro. So he knows that. The team knows that. Can they do that this week against Tampa Bay? That's what I really look for in this offense. Can you see Sincere McCormick get, maybe 20 carries this time instead of 15? And is he on the field on 3rd down, or do they not trust him yet in pass protection? Do you see Amir Abdullah out there more times than not on that 3rd down? That'll be the interesting storyline, and that'll see if this guy can continue to grow or not. And I think he can do a really good job. He just, like I said, he's got to be able to protect the quarterback on 3rd down.
Yeah, and then defensively, the Raiders are probably a little bit better than people on the outside looking in would think. I mean, they're top 15 across the board in total defense, passing defense, rushing defense, but they're way down towards the bottom of the league in scoring defense. So what's the big story outside of Max Crosby just wreaking havoc at every moment? But what's the biggest story on that side of the ball?
They're a really good defense, and they've got so many injuries. So many guys are banged up. I mean, Malcolm Kuntz never made it to the season. Christian Wilkins was their big free agent acquisition. He's on IR. Jacorian Bennett was their best corner. He's on IR. Marcus Epps was their safety returning starter. He's on IR. I mean, it's like so many guys are out that are starters. Nate Hobbs, a starter in the slot. He hasn't played in multiple weeks because of an ankle injury. All these players, but still, they're out there competing defensively. They're able to still get after it, and they do a really good job, especially early on. I mean, again, if you just kind of look at the scores and the box score, you're like, oh, yeah, the Raiders defense is terrible. They're not very good. But if you actually, like you said, take a look inside the numbers and actually watch the game a little bit, you'll see that, man, they're really good. But one, they're on the field all the time because their offense has been so bad. And then there's been so many turnovers from the offense, too. So all of a sudden, they'll turn the ball over and it'll be, first in goal for the other team or the 20 in the red zone already. It's like, what's going on? So more times than not, the Raiders defense is having to try to make something out of a bad situation. So they've been put in a no-win situation as far as I'm concerned all season long. I think that they're a really good defense, but a lot of times either the dam will crack and then, the other team will start to score and it'll start to kind of, like a snowball effect, or like I said, there'll be some turnovers, and all of a sudden you look up and there's multiple field goals and touchdowns put up, and you think that's a blowout game because, well, that's what the score tells you, but that's not what the real story was. So they're really actually a pretty good defense, as you mentioned, but they haven't been put in very good situations all year long by their offense.
Yeah, if there's one thing that Buccaneers fans can empathize with, it's the injury issues, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I'll talk more about that in a little bit, but what's kind of the feeling around Antonio Pierce as the head coach this year and how he's been doing, because obviously the record is not great,
Right.
but it feels like they are moving in the right direction, at least like we talked about on the defensive side of the ball. You need an answer at quarterback, and you need to figure out that run game. But what's kind of the feeling around the head coach?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's who you ask, right? I mean, you ask me, and I think that, okay, he should probably come back next year. There's so many different things he didn't have in his disposal this year, including the starting quarterback. I think that everyone knew that the Raiders wanted to go into the draft last year and go get their franchise quarterback in Jaden Daniels. Obviously, that didn't work. They ended up with a really good player in Brock Bowers. He's fantastic, right? I mean, he's been everything and then some. So, I mean, that's a good consolation prize to get him. But they haven't had consistent quarterback play. There's been so many injuries. It just seems like the team that he thought that he was going to have, he never really had. So my opinion is that he needs to come back next year. But again, if you ask members of Raider Nation, they'll tell you, no, we've seen enough, right? There's been too many bad in-game decisions, even at the end of the Kansas City game. I could say that I felt like he made a mistake there, deciding that they were going to try to run another play just to waste some time, as opposed to not spiking the ball on second down. You could have just, gone up to the line, acted like you were going to spike it, wait for a minute, and then actually snap the ball and then spike it and then run your kicker out there to kick. Instead, they tried to do too much. I thought they did too much, and it resulted in the fumble from Aiden O'Connell, or the miscommunication between the center and the quarterback. And, it was just a big mess. So it seems like there's been some in-game decisions that AP has made that haven't been the best. And so a lot of Raider Nation is saying, I don't see it getting better. So I don't think that, the Raiders should trust him to bring him back another year. That's going to be the big question. And now that Tom Brady's added to the mix as well, what role does he play? Is he really going to be, in charge of as much as like what rumors and reports are saying he's going to be in charge of? We don't know. There's never been one time that anyone's come out and said, this is what Tom Brady's role is going to be moving forward. So everything that we say is really a guesstimation. We really don't know yet. And so it's kind of one of those wait and see type things. I think AP should come back, but I probably am in the minority from other Raider fans. Most Raider fans are like, yeah, seen enough, go get somebody else.
All right. Well, the Buccaneers are looking to get a win in front of their home crowd for the first time since September. That is coming up next on a crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Raiders and Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So there was segment number 1, part 1 of the conversation, crossover edition. James Yarcho and myself talking all things Raiders. We'll flip the script coming up in segment number 2. We'll talk all things Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Offense, defense, what's going on with that team. Injuries will be a theme, just like injuries are a theme all season long for the Silver and Black. Tampa Bay, yeah, they're getting hit with the injury bug as well. So we'll flip the script. We'll talk all things Buccaneers in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a couple great sponsors here on the show, including FanDuel. And it is never too late to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Right now, all new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The Sportsbook app, the FanDuel Sportsbook app, gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. And right now, I believe Tampa Bay is, 6.5-point favorites at home versus the Raiders, and that's fine. The Raiders do a really good job against the spread, just like they did last week against Kansas City. Tampa Bay, they don't really cover the spread as often as you probably would think they should either. So that may be a good bet for you. You might want to take the Raiders and the points. But either way you look at it, when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I also want to talk about time. Why do I want to do that? Well, time is our most precious commodity. Don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Well, our good partners at Hillsdale College will help you do that with courses like history, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution, stuff you probably studied in school, right? Or maybe you didn't. Even if you did, maybe it's time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed basic, fundamental truths about the world and our place in it. So our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including the courses that I mentioned and a whole lot more. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Right now, go to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. It is crossover edition, crossover Thursday. Tampa Bay Raiders in Tampa Bay on the road for the Silver and Black. Looking forward to Week 14 action. What do they have to bring to the table? We talked all things Raiders in segment number 1, so it's time to flip the script and get into all things Tampa Bay. James Yarcho, host of Locked On Buccaneers, and myself, we talk about it. We break it down. Injuries are a theme, but the biggest storylines, offensively and defensively, for Tampa Bay is right here in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Check it out. Here we go.
It's been a story that's gradually built, and I think we've now reached a boiling point, and it's the emergence of Bucky Irving. He was just given the NFC Offensive Player of the Week for his performance against Carolina. He has 732 rushing yards this season, 240 rushing yards, 337 total yards, and 2 touchdowns in just the last 2 games. Then 59.7% missed tackle rate. That's the most among running backs since 2016. So while Raiders fans are super hyped about Bowers, as they should be, Bucs fans are equally hyped about Bucky Irving. And honestly, both of these guys should be in Offensive Rookie of the Year consideration, but it looks like that's going to be a 2-player race between Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix because awards only recognize the quarterback position.
Yeah.
But Bucky he's been the workhorse. He's been the energizer. He did suffer a hip injury on Sunday, returning a kick. He did not practice on Wednesday. So that's definitely a concern if he can't go on Sunday, but he injured his hip during the kick right before halftime, went back out on the field, still broke off a 50-yard run. He was still electric. He was sore. He was wrapped up at the end of the game, but I would be shocked if he ends up being held out. If he can't go, it's a pretty serious injury, but Bucky Irving being the spark plug of this offense is what continues to keep the Bucs up towards where they are. I mean, this was the worst rushing team in the NFL the last 2 years, and they're up in the top 10 now because of his production.
I'll tell you this, man. Bucky Irving is a good one. I remember him coming out of college. I remember looking at him, especially knowing that the Raiders wanted to run the Brock the way that they do, and obviously they've struggled. They're actually the worst team in the NFL when it comes to running, and I kept saying, man, Bucky Irving is really good, and obviously he was on a really talented Oregon squad with Jackson Powers-Johnson, Bo Nix, Troy Franklin, all guys that are in the league, right? JPJ is the starting center for the Raiders. Bo Nix is obviously doing his thing in Denver, but Bucky Irving was one of those guys I kept saying, man, like, don't sleep on this dude, right? I know that everyone looks at a running back, oh, you can get one anywhere. That dude's a special guy, man. So the Buccaneers have a really good player in Bucky Irving. I saw him on that injury report, and I thought, oh, man. And look, he's a guy that the Raiders, Antonio Pierce, has talked about. They know what he brings to the table. All those defenders know what he brings to the table. It's going to be a tough time trying to slow him down and corral him. Hopefully he's healthy. Would love to see him go just because, well, he's a hell of a player. And obviously I know he means a lot to that Tampa Bay offense. And, I also saw guys like Mike Evans. I know he's been sidelined for a while, but he was on the injury report as well. I think they had like 4 or 5 guys that did not practice on Wednesday. Kind of what's the status with these guys? Is it more just kind of easing them into later in the week, or do you think there's a chance that multiple guys may not go?
I think Evans is probably going to go, but they added a calf injury in addition to the hamstring injury where that caused him to miss significant time. But, a lot of these guys, we really just don't know. And a lot of them are on the defensive side of the ball. But, I think Bucky plays. I'm really confident that Mike Evans is going to play. Some Bucs fans are concerned about the streak, right? 10 consecutive seasons to start his career with 1,000 yards. And he's pretty far off. He needed 95 yards per game coming out of the bye week, only got 67 against the New York Giants. Well, then he turns around, he gets 118 against the Carolina Panthers. So now he has to average like 95.7 for the rest of the season to hit that 1,000-yard mark. So I expect Baker to target him heavily, but he hasn't been going deep. He hasn't been running those go routes. He hasn't been, really taking off and running, and they're kind of easing him back in that way. A lot of intermediate routes for Mike Evans, but he makes the catches, racks up the yards. But because you did bring up the injuries, I'm going to flip it over to the biggest concern or the biggest story surrounding the defense, and that is the injuries pile up week after week after week. They lost Jordan Whitehead for the rest of the regular season. They had signed Mike Edwards, brought him back to Tampa just 2 weeks ago. He's out this week with an injury that he sustained against Carolina. Rookie Tyke Smith, the corner out of Georgia, he's probably out for Sunday's game. He's missed a lot of time now with a knee injury. They had to dip back into the disgusting well that is Ryan Neal because they're so thin at back. Kayvon Merriweather, he's likely going to get some playing time this weekend. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka missed last week. He was limited on Wednesday during their walkthrough, but his status is probably still up in the air. Then the guy that stepped up in JTS's absence, Anthony Nelson, he's dealing with a shoulder injury. He didn't practice. Starting linebacker AJ Britt did not practice, dealing with an ankle injury. So when you were talking about all these defensive injuries for the Raiders, I'm sitting there thinking, yep, how that feels for all your listeners and viewers. But this defense is really, really banged up, and that's put a limit on what Todd Bowles has been able to do. He's a guy that likes to pin his ears back. He likes to bring blitzes from all over the place. But when you don't have the personnel to be able to execute your defense the way you normally do, then you have what the Bucs defense is this year, which is one of the worst in the NFL. You have an inside linebacker in KJ Britt. When he's healthy, still can't defend the tight end. Bowers is going to feast on Sunday. He is going to absolutely feast, because even when they were containing the tight end because of the safeties, all those safeties are gone, and Winfield can't do everything by himself. So it's a really, really tough situation. It doesn't matter what kind of offense you're going up against when you are promoting guys from the practice squad and signing guys off the street just to be able to have 11 players on the field. It's tough.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's wild looking at the injury report. It's one of the first times all season long that it's actually been longer for the opponent than it is for the Raiders, right? I mean, I saw it and I was like, wait, hold on. Is this a role reversal? What's going on here? So I understand completely. I hate that. That's what time of year it is, though. And, the later on it gets in the season, a lot of guys are dealing with something. Most guys are dealing with something. And it looks like Tampa Bay is dealing with a lot. So that's going to be, tough to try to fill those voids. It's going to be two teams that are dealing with a bunch of injuries, battling it out on Sunday. But, I always wanted to ask about Baker Mayfield. I covered him when he was at Oklahoma in the Big 12, and obviously went to Cleveland as the number one pick, then went to Carolina, didn't work out, went to the Rams, beat the Raiders after being in LA for like 2 days, and all of a sudden was found a way to beat them. What is it about Baker Mayfield and Tampa Bay that just made him the right guy? He went there a year ago, and I thought, okay, he's probably going to end up being a backup at best, when it's all said and done. And he gets him to the playoffs and makes a run, wins the playoff game, and almost two. Why did he fit so well in Tampa Bay?
I think a lot of it has to do with being in an organization that truly believed in him, that truly wanted him. And you can go back to 2022 when Tom Brady had retired briefly, and the Bucs were inquiring about Baker Mayfield. Can they trade for him? Well, then Brady unretires and he plays, but the Bucs were interested in him before he got shipped off to Carolina. So this is a team that had already shown interest in him once before, a coaching staff that had shown interest in him, a general manager that absolutely loved him and loved what he brought. And I think kind of that mentality of walking into a place that wasn't the Browns, wasn't the Panthers. Obviously, the Rams wanted him, but he knew he couldn't start there. So, going to a place where he could compete for a starting job, playing for a team that believed in him and wanted him, I think completely flipped his entire mindset. And now, he's playing loose. He's having fun. He's enjoying himself, and the results speak for themselves. I mean, these are back-to-back career years for Baker Mayfield. He's on pace to beat all of his numbers from last year, which were all career best. So it helps when you have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin to throw the football to. And of course, he doesn't have Godwin now, but this just seemed like the right place at the right time for Baker.
It's awesome. It really is. Again, I like him a lot, and thought that he was going to be in Cleveland forever after getting them into the playoffs. And, nobody had done that in Cleveland in a long time. And obviously they end up shipping him off. But, it was cool to see him get that resurgence there in Tampa Bay. Clearly it worked. And I'll say this about Mike Evans real quick, and I don't have to tell you, you already know, probably one of the most underrated wide receivers in the league, right? When you talk about the best wide receivers in the league, no one ever says, oh, Mike Evans is really a great wide receiver. They should. He's fantastic. He's been fantastic since A&M, and he's done some great things there in Tampa Bay. And when remember they said, oh, there's a good chance Mike Evans doesn't come back next year. He's going to be a free agent, this, that, and the other. I was like, that would be silly. I was glad to see that he returned to Tampa Bay, and hopefully he's healthy on Sunday. Would love to see him out there full strength going up against probably DeCam Richardson, who's a rookie DB who's been thrown into the fire due to injury. That ought to be an interesting matchup. Talk about, get your feet wet in the league. Go up against that dude named Mike Evans.
Yeah, that'll certainly be a test, but there won't be too many wide receivers that he has to go up against that are tougher than Mike Evans. So if he does a decent job against Mike, that's going to speak volumes for the future that he has in this league. All right, what are the 3 things that each team needs to do to win this week? That is coming up next on a crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Raiders and Locked On Bucs.
So there you go. There was all things Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And, well, I'll tell you right now, just from the sound of it, especially the struggles defensively, this could be a game that Brock Bowers has a big-time performance. Right? I mean, from what James has told us so far, Tampa Bay struggles, and I mean struggles, to stop the tight end. And Brock Bowers, as we know, is not any ordinary tight end. They're dealing with a lot of injuries. Raiders are dealing with a lot of injuries. They need to win. They have so many hopes and dreams, still aspirations as a team. They have to get this win. They got some tough ones coming up, so every win that they can get is the best for them. And the Raiders have an opportunity to play spoiler, just like they did last week against Kansas City. So what's going to be the keys to victory? What is it going to take to get that dub? We'll talk about it in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about another great sponsor here on the show, and that is Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying, well, that magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they absolutely mean it. So, all plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on nation's largest 5G network. I know that was super important. Not only that, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan. Bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. That's Mint, MINT, mobile.com/LockedOnNFL. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. $45 upfront payment required, which is equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower than 40 GB on a limited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, crossover edition, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Las Vegas Raiders, Week 14 action. A lot of fun that we're having on this show. James Yarcho, host of Locked On Bucs, and myself breaking it down. And this is the segment to really break it down. Get into the how, right? What is the path to victory? 3 big keys that both the Raiders are going to need to get a victory and the Buccaneers will need to get a victory. So you heard the offense and defense storylines for both teams. Now the path to victory is coming up. Let's break it on down here in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast.
What are the 3 things that the Raiders have to do in order to get a win on the road against the Buccaneers?
Well, I'll start with the offense, and they've got to be able to run the ball. They've got to be able to continue to feed Sincere McCormick and keep their offense balanced, right? I mean, Aiden O'Connell threw the ball 35 times against Kansas City. That's about the sweet spot. You want them around 30, 35 passes. There was times where they were I think they threw the ball 97 times in two games before that. They can't have that. That's not a recipe for success for the Silver and Black. They've got to be a lot more balanced. So I think that seeing Sincere McCormick get around 20 carries, if possible, around that number, I think that would be really good. Again, that's something that Antonio Pierce has wanted to do all season long, is run the ball, just have that balance. And they haven't really had it, but now that Scott Turner is offensive coordinator and Aiden O'Connell is the quarterback, it looks like that they're better off for each other. It seems like that they're a better marriage than Scott Turner and Gardner Minshew, or Gardner Minshew and Luke Getsy, or Aiden O'Connell and Luke Getsy. Like, it just looks better with Aiden O'Connell and Scott Turner. So I think that the first key, the biggest key, is probably running the ball for the Raiders to make sure that they're able to get that run game established, get there around about 20 carries. Secondly, when Aiden O'Connell is throwing the ball, throw it to the playmakers, right? He had no problem doing that last week against Kansas City. Brock Bowers had 10 catches. Jacoby Myers had a handful of catches. Trey Tucker was able to stretch the field. Got to get the ball to the playmakers. Those guys do exactly what they're said. Playmakers. Brock Bowers, 10 catches, 140 yards. Fantastic rookie. I know that every team's going to try to take him away, but you've got to find a way to get him involved and keep him involved. There was chances and times in the season where he got involved early in the game, and then all of a sudden, coming out of halftime, the Raiders wouldn't get him the rock. So 89, wherever 89 is at, Aiden O'Connell's got to make sure that he's able to get it to him. And Jacoby Myers, don't sleep on him as well. He's a really, not quiet, but he's one of those guys that you don't really talk about all the time. Jacoby Myers, but he's a really good player. So those are the two main playmakers that I'm looking at that they've got to be able to, feature offensively when Aiden O'Connell is throwing the rock. And then third, just flipping over to the defensive side of things, they don't cause too many turnovers. They really don't, but they need to. They need to give their offense a chance. They need to create a turnover or two, maybe take the ball away from Baker, whether that's a strip sack or interception, whatever the case may be. Somehow, some way, this, band of brothers that are out there that might not necessarily be the household names that you thought you were going to have out there defensively, someone's got to make a play. Who's going to step up? Is it Mad Max Crosby? Will he make a play? We see K'Lavon Chason, a guy that the Raiders picked up off of waivers, right? And all of a sudden he's stepping up and making some plays. He wreaked havoc on Patrick Mahomes a week ago. Can he get to the quarterback and strip him? Just who's going to step up and make that game-changing play? Right. They've got to have something go in their favor. More times than not, you'll see, and that's why they're on an 8-game losing streak. They'll have things go against them. They'll have some bad luck on their side, just like the ending of that game against Kansas City. Well, they've got to create their good luck. How are they going to create the good luck? How is that going to happen? Someone's got to create a turnover. And I'll say this as well. One little side note, little asterisk. Daniel Carlson, who's a fantastic kicker for the Raiders, missed 3 field goals a week ago, 55, 56, and 58. In the cold, Arrowhead. No one makes those kicks, so I don't really hold that against him. I think it was a bad day at the office, but it would be nice to see him get back. I don't want to see him kick a bunch of field goals. I'd rather see him get touchdowns, but it would be nice to see him, see one of those balls go through the upright just so his confidence stays up. So
yeah, kind of like a basketball player that's gone ice cold. Just get a layup. Yeah. Just see the ball go through the net, and you'll get back on track.
Yep, exactly.
Real quick. I don't want this to happen, but I'm going to throw this out there. Do you happen to know what the NFL record is for the most receiving yards in a single game by a rookie tight end?
I don't know that number. I know that Brock Bowers is about to break the rookie tight end reception record of Sam Laporta that had 86. He's already at 84. So I'm assuming he's going to break that coming up on Sunday. I don't know the yardage. Man, that's a good question. I know he's at 8 something now, 840, and had 140 last week. So I mean, he's up there. He should be over 1,000 yards, I do believe, this season if he continues to play and stays healthy. Knock on wood, because everyone's injured on the Raiders. So, and again, not going to get any sympathy from you as everyone's injured on Tampa Bay as well.
Yeah, his 140 yards performance last week is 8th all time.
Yeah.
For a single game by a rookie tight end. The record is 212 by Jackie Smith back in 1963.
Wow.
I'm not saying that Brock Bowers is going to break that record on Sunday. I'm just saying that the Bucs have been terrible against the tight end this year, and everybody's hurt. So just kind of, I don't know, throwing it out there. For the Bucs, the 3 keys in this one: win the turnover battle, control the clock, and start fast. So the Raiders are the worst in the league with a -18 turnover differential. The Bucs, they're sitting at a -1 turnover differential on the season. They lost the turnover battle last week, still managed to win the game. Not very often are you going to lose the turnover battle and still win the game. You cannot give teams these extra chances, these self-inflicted wounds, by turning the ball over, getting stupid penalties like they did against Carolina, made that game a lot closer than it probably should have been. You especially can't do that at home. against a team that's coming off of an emotional loss against a division rival, getting ready for a big primetime game the following week. So you have to win the turnover battle in order to control the clock. Bucky Irving, Rashad White, Sean Tucker, just ground and pound all day long. The Bucs had almost 40 minutes time of possession last week against the Carolina Panthers. Do that again. Wear that defense down, and then the later you get into the game, that's when Bucky is going to take off for a 30, 40, 50-yard run. That's when Rashad's going to take off for a 30 or 40-yard run, just like we saw last week, because that defense was exhausted. These long, sustained 11, 12, 15-play drives that the Bucs have had ending in touchdowns, that is what is going to help you win this game and then start fast. The offense was absolutely lethargic against Carolina. They started slow. They continued slow. They didn't start going until the fourth quarter when they scored on every possession that they had in order to force an overtime. So the slow start leads to forcing plays. You don't want Baker Mayfield forcing plays because that leads to mistakes and that leads to turnovers. Then you have to scratch and you have to claw and you have to try to battle your way back. If you jump out to an early lead and focus on keeping it rather than having to battle back for the second straight week, you're going to have a much better chance of winning this one. The Bucs cannot afford to lose more than one game the rest of the season. They still have the Chargers on the schedule. They still have the Panthers again. They're at Dallas in prime time. This is a game that they have to win in front of their home fans. Win the turnover battle, start fast, and then just run the ball like crazy with the NFC's offensive player of the week.
I'll tell you what, I can back you up 100% on that turnover stat, right? As you mentioned, the Raiders are the worst in the league as far as turnovers, and there's a reason why they only have 2 wins. I mean, it's that simple, right? You lose a turnover battle, you're going to lose the game more times than not, and that's what the Raiders' problem has been. So, yeah, that win in the turnover battle, man, is always going to be a key, and really in this game, obviously, it's going to be a massive key for both teams.
All right, well, that is going to do it for Crossover Thursday. Please check out everything going on Twitter at your boy Q, at JYarcho_Bucs. Make sure you're subscribed to both of these shows on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you so much for joining us here on a Crossover Thursday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
There it is. There it was. We broke it down offensively, defensively, past the victory. Week 14 action. We have set the stage. James Yarcho, host of Locked On Bucs, does a fantastic job. You want to learn more about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I definitely encourage you to go check out that show. Again, he does a really good job. It's great to catch up with them. I don't get to catch up with them very often. It's not like the Raiders play Tampa Bay twice a year or whatever. They're not in the division. But whenever we do get to catch up, I think the last time we caught up, it was funny. He was talking about it. I still worked in Central Texas. So you know that was multiple years ago, right? I mean, I've been in Vegas since 2021, so that could tell you how long it's been since we hooked up on a crossover edition, but it's always great to catch up with him. Really good dude. Definitely appreciate him. So you know everything you need to know about Tampa Bay. If not, you can go check out his show. And, of course, tomorrow we'll talk all things silver and black and how they can pick up a victory over those Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Week 14. We'll get back to your calls and texts, news and notes, and a whole lot more as we close out the week really strong as we do on the daily and the weekly here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.